And we are live. So we are back. It's still April 5th, and this is still Senate Government Operations. We're back after a short break here. And we're going to spend a little time looking again at where we are with the burn pits, where we are with the legislation that we passed before, and then we heard from Congressman Welch about what's happening in Washington, and Senator Collimore had a very interesting question. At the federal level, what is it that they call it, Senator Collimore?
Yikes.
It says Airborne Hazards and Burn Pit Center of Excellence.
Yeah. What is Center of Excellence? That seems almost at odds with the whole idea of burn pits.
But that's a VA initiative, and we have the PTSD Center of Excellence here in White River.
What does Center of Excellence? Why use?
Subject matter insurance.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Okay.
all it does.
Really, in a nutshell.
Yeah, it just struck me as being odd.
Yeah. A cohort of subject matter experts.
Ah,
Brings all the experts.
Yeah, I got you.
And I learned a new one today, a new term. You center something. And I thought it should be centralized, but it means you're moving it from the margins into the center. I'd never heard that before. It sounded so odd in this sentence that we were looking at this morning. But anyway, okay, so I think we can jump in. Would you, General Knight, would you like to just talk to us a little bit about where you are and the campaign that you're doing? First, maybe I should tell you that when we met last time, we decided that it would be good for us to have some kind of a more public face and awareness to get people. So I think what we heard was that from the about 10,000 people that are eligible, 930 have signed up. That was the latest figure that we heard.
I have more recent information for you, man.
Good. And anyway, Senator Collimore, who you probably know, is the voice of Rockland on the radio station.
Used to be.
And he and June Hessen agreed to work together a little bit to work with coming up with some kind of a PSA or something. Yeah. And I talked to VPR and Vermont Public Television are together now, and I talked to them about doing something, and they're trying to figure out how best to do it. They don't really do PSAs because they're a public channel to begin with, but they would do a program. They would do a program on television, and they would do a program on the radio, and a couple of them. So
I may be able to assist.
Good.
So,
yes.
We have a very strong relationship with Wendy Mays, the executive director of the Vermont Association of Broadcasters. And she's been immensely helpful to us as an organization. We needed airtime, and there are obviously many radio stations are always looking for interviews. And I'm happy to link up with both
Good.
Senator Collimore and June Heston to get some airtime.
Good. All right. Okay. So take it away.
Yes, ma'am. So I put together some notes here. Some of this may seem redundant, but I think it's important to put it in as a matter of record and to, again, register some of my concerns that I share with June. For the past 2+ years, I've made enrollment of our veterans exposed to airborne hazards and the open burn pit. Open burn pit's a priority. Our message is very straightforward. To the recently deployed or veterans who've returned from deployment to the many austere locations throughout the world, get them enrolled in the VA Airborne Hazards and Open Air Burn Pits Registry. To do so provides valuable information for the Veterans Administration to research and potentially determine presumptive illnesses that result from exposure. Now, since our law passed some 2 years ago, our enrollment has grown from originally, and Madam Chair, I'll give you the most updated numbers. So in 2018, we had 366 participants in the burn pit registry. 2019, we grew that to 544. 2020, we're at 685. 2021 at 834. In 2022, our most recent data is 1,026, and that's our year to date. This past August, the Veterans Administration determined that 3 ailments are now considered presumptive, resulting from exposure to burn pit, airborne hazards and burn pits: rhinitis, sinusitis, and asthma. We must continue our effort to have veterans enroll. The scale of the undertaking is significant. And the reason I say this, as an example, we've recently had nearly 1,000 of our Vermont Army National Guard return from deployment to 3 different combatant commands: Africa Command, Central Command, and European Command. While none were directly exposed to burn pits, there was still poor air quality and certainly local burning of refuse. During the demobilization process, our soldiers were encouraged to give an opportunity to enroll. My concern here is after 20 years of deployments and combat operations, I'm certain the number of deployed veterans who were exposed to these toxins is much higher. When veterans separate from the service, they retire or leave Vermont, we lose track of them. I've reached out just recently, and I'll follow up with them next week, to the Adjutants General Association, so my colleagues and all other 53 states, territories, in DC, and I simply asked the question, this was a comparative, here's what we're doing, what are you doing? We can make a difference as a state. We're leading the way in many areas. I believe this to be one of them. So I did get a note back that we will put this in part of our executive session next week in Washington, DC. I'm not a medical research specialist. I'm certainly not a doctor, but I can provide you a dozen examples of aberrant diseases, primarily cancers, that have occurred far too early in the lives of our members. And understand, this is just what I know off the top of my head. One of our Pennsylvania soldiers died from a brain tumor. These are soldiers that we deployed with. Former Vermont soldiers currently undergoing treatment following emergency surgery to remove the brain tumor. 3 Vermont soldiers have died from pancreatic cancer. My friend, Mike Heston, and recently Sergeant Wayne King from Barry are 2 of them. One of our colleagues in Pennsylvania died from pancreatic cancer. 2 of our soldiers died from metastasized prostate cancer. Sergeant Major Mike Cram was one of them. 6 other members of their platoon stationed at the same place at the same time in Afghanistan were all dealing with prostate issues before age 50. One of our airmen died from lung cancer. And about 6 months ago, Staff Sergeant Wesley Black died from metastasized colon cancer at age 36. He's survived by his wife Laura and his son Ronan, who was 5 at the time of his passing. All were deployed at least once, some twice, to areas where burn pits were in use. What's important for our veterans to do, as you all understand here, is to sign a medical release from their primary care physician and get into the VA system. If veterans exposed to these toxins develop unusual illnesses, it's critical to share their information from their primary care provider to the VA and perhaps establish a linkage. We have an amazing VA here at White River. I have an outstanding relationship with them. Dr. Rush is amazing. His staff is incredible. We also have our veteran outreach coordinators within our family programs in the Vermont National Guard. These are veterans, and they have worked very diligently to make enrollment into the VA system that much easier. As you know, we initiated a messaging campaign this past November, and that effort continues. So when I meet with members of our Guard, I take every opportunity to discuss this, to encourage enrollment. And I also include families in that conversation. We just recently had soldiers coming back, buy a 10 yellow ribbon, provide my opening comments, and this is one of them. And I will continue working with all interested agencies, directorates, partner states, and the VA to ensure we grow our enrollment. I think we owe that to our veterans. So we're making progress, ma'am. I don't think it's enough. I think the frustration remains that we can't reach those that have left the state. So that's my interest in reaching out to my counterparts in other states to make sure that they can pick up what we're doing and grow it across the Guard.
So, right before the pandemic hit, you were prepared, and there were a number of, I know Laura Sevilla and I were working with you. There were a number of people who were interested in kind of helping you, not necessarily hosting, but helping you get the word out. And you had mobile units that you were going to bring out. And then, of course, everything in person stopped. Is that still a possibility? And is that something that we could help promote?
And do this summer.
And yeah.
Because I think a bunch of us would love to
yeah.
join and help do that, and I'll hold you.
Yes, ma'am, I'll follow up with my public affairs team. We had put a lot of work into that with the VA. And the initial challenge was simply, it's a technical term, but basically veterans who wanted to enroll in the VA system had to be given a token, a digital token in order for them to be able to do that. So I think we've gotten over that. There were some limitations. I know Mr. Bragg came up with the concept of putting state laptops, which got around our government firewalls and allows folks to more easily enroll. So I'll revisit that.
Yeah,
We'll bring a note back, but I think if we can do that, and I think it makes sense, you're all on social media or have Front Porch Forum, you certainly can reach out to your constituents. That'd be very beneficial for us.
yeah, I think that, if we could do it at a couple different places in every county, I think that would be, we could beat the bushes to get people out there and help get the word out.
If I could make it would make sense to make another go at it. So what happened last summer into the fall was we worked with the various, the VFW and the American Legion to host events at the various places around the state so that we had events in every county. But quickly we ran into this roadblock with veterans being able to get registered in the VA so they could even have an account. It became very cumbersome. And one of the biggest roadblocks was being able to get the help desk to assist with them, and also getting Veterans Administration personnel to possibly do one-on-one interviews with people that just basically weren't computer literate.
Yeah.
So I think most of those stumbling blocks have been worked through, and it probably would make sense to make another run at it. But because the campaign is all there, the groundwork, the logistics, all of it's there. Just early on, there were just too many roadblocks to make it to where we could show up at a venue and plan on people showing up. So we ended up actually doing a lot of public service type announcements and getting it out there. And we were literally, our veteran service officers and our family services program were literally working one-on-one registrations, helping people get through some of those roadblocks and then subsequently. Now, to the general's point about our airmen, our soldiers that are just recently deployed, we'll get another run at them. The Army does a thing called SRC, Soldier Readiness, and it's an annual event for the soldiers. So all 25 or 2,600 soldiers cycle through this fitness, it's a readiness event. And we have mobile kiosks set up, and one of the stations is they stop there and they're reminded about burn pits, and they are encouraged to log in and register and all that. We get some uptake, but probably not as much as we should. But we continually look for options to take a run at it.
Yeah, I mean, if you had all the feet on the ground, I mean, you have 30 senators, and then there's the National Guard caucus now.
Right.
That so should be a lot of people out there.
It's definitely time to take another run at it.
I have at least one friend who was in Iraq who has diverticulitis, who's really suffering, and we've gotten him legal help in the VA, and he still meets with so many roadblocks for somebody who's really low income and struggling with a lot of issues. And I just think we need to be prepared for a system that's not particularly adequate for all of the health issues that people are dealing with. And it's one thing for us to get the word out. It's another to really absorb the pain and frustration of a lot of veterans who are being left behind and let down by the system.
I think you bring up a very important point. By all of those folks that I noted that are suffering from or past with cancers, they're not related to lung issues.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more that goes to this, and I mentioned this in my testimony last year or the year prior with June. And I had another interview with the media folks don't understand, the soot from these burn pits settles into this talcum powder fine dust in many of the locations. It's stirred up again and again and again over the course of a year. You're eating it, breathing it, drinking it for a year. It doesn't leave your body.
Yeah, well, there are a ton of things that we should be doing for veterans that are beyond this, that I know we heard from the representative from Bernie's office about the budgetary issues and what it would mean to really, really take care of veterans. But I'd love to go there on all of it, but my little brain is saying at least we can maybe do this.
So I think we had talked about the universe of eligible people who might be eligible, or who might be the population who might have been exposed with our National Guard is 10,000. Is that right? Is that?
That's a
what we're
pretty
thinking.
realistic number.
Over the course of 20
Over
years.
20 years of
Sure.
deployments, that's a pretty.
That's a
easy
realistic.
number.
So
Yeah.
how many of those 10,000 do we think are still in Vermont? Is that what you estimated being the number that stayed in Vermont?
Well, that's based on deployments. We know how many deployed in theater.
But
we don't
Frank, you
know
said that
if-
not everybody stays.
No, ma'am.
And not everybody's
When they retire or separate from the service,
Right.
You don't know where
once
they are.
they're out of state, they have no reporting
So there
requirement.
may or may not be 10,000 are here in Vermont, but that's roughly our population.
But surely it's more than 1,000.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I mean, we know that, I think.
Absolutely. And again, that's my interest in reaching out to my colleagues and our partner states, because they need to do the same thing we're doing, because our soldiers and everyone somewhere. They're somewhere in the United States.
And their soldiers might have come here.
I wish they would.
Right, did you?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony, General. How recently were those three, I'll call them conditions, if you will, illnesses, whatever, listed as presumptive?
Just this past August, sir.
Wow, so there's been at least some movement in that regard. I know if you go back to the Vietnam War, there was certainly Agent Orange in the whole, and it seemed to take years and years and years and years.
It did.
And I'm sure there was a purposeful avoidance of doing that in some ways too, because of the cost. Do we know also, there's been a reduction in the incidence of burn pits throughout the world that we're sending people to, or?
There has been.
Okay,
As
we're
an
still doing it to
example.
some degree?
I'm not sure. I believe there were 8.
I'm not sure.
Not even that many, perhaps. I'd have to do a little more research and let you know. Jude, do you know?
June, do you know?
Last I heard, there were 9 still burning.
That's with open ones, right? Not with the
Yes.
incinerators.
Right.
Thank you.
And General, can you just remind us what the 3 presumptive diseases are again?
There were rhinitis, sinusitis,
Asthma.
and asthma.
General, didn't they have to like 9?
I haven't had.
June would be aware.
Yeah.
I thought they added a bunch of.
June, are you aware? Have they added any of the presumptive illnesses after those 3 this past August?
Those aren't cancer.
They have not added any other presumptions. They are looking at, in the legislation honoring our PACT Act, that there are lists of presumptives in there, but they're still really not paying attention to the evidence that's already out there. And our military and veterans are not dying from those 3 presumptives. They're dying from cancer.
Exactly. That was
Right.
sort of my concern, is that none of these are the cancers that are killing people.
You know, I believe one of the ones on that list was the MGUS, which is a precursor to multiple myeloma, on the list that Congressman Welch was working on.
Yes, and that is coming out of, I believe, the exposure at Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
Because we have a veteran living in Vermont who is fighting that fight with multiple myeloma and was stationed at Camp Lejeune.
Thank you, ma'am.
So,
Yeah,
All right.
it's just amazing the DOD still has 9 of those.
Allison still wants to take on the whole.
I want to
DOD.
take on the DOD. I just can't believe they're allowed to do this abroad. It's
I know.
just shocking.
It is, and that they still have 9 of them going? That's outrageous.
I'll have to confirm that, ma'am, but I believe there are 8 or 9.
I bet none of them are in Europe.
Our folks in Kosovo had their own problems and because of that, there were 2 coal-fired power plants there, and the air quality was.
Oh, I bet it's awful.
Yeah.
Like being in London in the
Pretty rough.
17th century. Yeah. Awful.
Okay, so how can we be the most helpful? Other than if you do the campaign again around, having people go out and having different sites, we can certainly be helpful there. And we can be helpful around some PSAs and getting some, I talked to Bob Kinzel the other day and he said they would do something and public television would do something. How else can we be the most helpful?
I think those all will be very helpful, ma'am, and June, I'll defer to you as well. But I think you should be a part of the cycle of interviews. I think that's easy enough and certainly effective enough to get that off the ground pretty quickly. I'm happy to speak to it, as is June, as is Pat Graham, any number of other folks, but I think it's also pretty powerful for our legislators.
I mean, if somebody, feels like they are getting inadequate information or inadequate resources, where do they go generally? I mean, I think a lot of them go to our federal delegation, but if we funded caseworkers or legal support, would that help draw down more resources for our veterans who are getting denied disability or denied care?
Look at that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it would do. Bob Burke is on here
Yeah.
with us, and his staff, that's their specialty. And I don't know if Bob has any thoughts on that.
Well, let's say we put out a thing on Front Porch Forum and said if, and knew that if we talked to somebody who just telling them about the burn pit wasn't particularly adequate for them, I'd love to hear from Bob. What if we just said to call your office? Do you need more support or personnel if people were to actually reach out to you in large numbers for help?
The way that the program is set up, there's not a lot that we can do for help, right? So it's the individual going on to the site and doing the registry. We can't do it for them, but in terms of providing additional information, we certainly can do that. But there's not a lot other than to point them toward the federal VA program.
I think that Senator Romhinsdale also meant about if they weren't necessarily eligible for the burn pit, but they needed other assistance and other help and getting in touch with the VA, that we could give a general number at your office to call to, is that what you were?
Yeah, I mean, people have their disability status denied around these issues. Like, I've just talked to so many people who this could be really frustrating for them to just be told to sign up for a registry when they're really struggling. They're just struggling to get what they deserved in terms of help.
That's a valid point, Dan, but I've spoken with a number of veterans who, in essence, gave up.
Yeah.
They were so stymied by the system, and we've come a long way. I've encouraged some of them to go revisit the issue. But we have a very solid team of experienced veteran outreach coordinators within family programs, and they are linked in to a number of resources that can help veterans get what they deserve and what they've earned.
Okay. I mean, I have heard when it gets to the point of legal needs, but it can become challenging. So I don't know if that's been your experience or you have a legal advocate
We don't have a legal advocate within our family program. But the outreach coordinator may have a network that they can leverage. Right? Certainly.
And the thing about the outreach coordinators is they're not just for guardsmen, current guardsmen.
Right, okay, that is helpful.
They're for all of them.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay.
yeah. I have
Our
talked to
family
them.
services outreach coordinators are for all,
Oh, okay.
all veterans.
Okay, that was gonna be my question.
It's just like the. Go ahead, Bob.
So for filing for disability, we now have 3, soon to be 4 service officers, right? So it is a very convoluted and complicated process. So they take power of attorney and they are your representative all the way up and through the Court of Veterans Appeals, which is before a judge, right? So so you file a claim, it goes to a rater at the VA, right? If it's not on that presumptive list, it's going to get denied, period. Okay. Now you're taking it to appeal and you're presenting medical information to support the claim, right? And so it's a hard road.
Yeah, but Bob, I think she's not just talking about burn pit stuff though. Just in general, disabilities, potentially service-connected disabilities.
Yeah, just getting,
I mean, then the people I've talked to recently, it was burn pit
Okay.
related, I feel like they are the ones getting denied because we are clear that there's not a presumptive.
And it's
That's what their illness is.
it's for any of the registries. June had mentioned Camp Lejeune. That's a different registry. That's contaminated water. There's still the Agent Orange, and now that got opened up to Blue Water Navy sailors. And again, they have to prove that their ship was within X number of miles during this time period. So just disabilities in general, it's not an easy road to hoe. And don't ever try and file on your own.
well, I think that there's a general tendency, whether it's the Veterans Affairs or Social Security or anybody else, is to deny.
Yeah.
First answer is no.
First answer is no. If you apply for Social Security disability, no. And then about 50%, 60% drop off and don't pursue it. And then the second time you get a no, then another. So about 10% of the people who actually apply end up getting disability. And I don't know if it's that, but that's the way Social Security works. I assume that's
Are people
probably the.
denied from Social Security?
Huh?
People are denied.
Are you serious? People who apply for disability? for
Oh,
Social
disability, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
SSI,
SSDI.
SSDI.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was gonna say Social Security. So for me, for veterans, it should be like Social Security where everyone is exception. I mean, it's just shocking to me that it's, to me, anyway. I don't know when that stopped. When did it stop that all veterans weren't automatically enrolled in the VA system? When did that end? Because that was an assumption, I thought, through World War II.
Well, that's the assumption we made, but I don't know if that ever was really true.
Was that
I don't
true?
think so.
It's never been automatic enrollment.
No.
It's never been automatic.
I don't believe so, man.
It's just unbelievable to me.
My father's a 35-year veteran, and 20 years ago when he retired, he had to enroll, and it wasn't an automatic thing.
And some people can't even enroll, right?
What? I mean,
So there's different categories, right? So I can enroll, I am eligible, but as I said before, why am I going to go through that pain when I know I'm going to be put in a category that I'm never going to be seen there? Not going there. I don't need more work. So
just enrolling means nothing unless you can actually.
benefit from it.
Yeah.
And that actually brings up a good point. If you look at when it comes to funding and resources going into the Veterans Administration, their patient base is actually growing smaller. This is a conversation I had with Senator Sanders with the passing of our World War II, our Korean War veterans, eventually our Vietnam era veterans, and our next generation from the Gulf War forward are simply not using the VA to the degree, my perspective, that we should.
Yeah.
Well, because we've made the barriers so ridiculous.
Yes, ma'am, that could be an element to it. It may be simply folks not messaging it enough, and because younger folks don't know that the VA is a resource for them. And Bob, I don't know what your experience is with that, but that's kind of what I'm seeing. It's kind of like getting young soldiers and airmen to sign up for the DFW or the American Legion. It's just generationally it's changing. They're not using the VA.
Right, because anybody who deployed in OEF, OIF, is immediately eligible for 5 years of care through the VA. You don't have to meet the you meet the eligibility criteria, but then you're automatically enrolled and can be seen. You don't get put in category F or G, where you're never going to get seen in the next 10 years. And I don't think that that's well advertised through the VA or through the Department of Defense.
Well, we have a VA clinic in Brattleboro that's just closing.
Well, that was the recommendation, was to merge.
Right, yeah. I don't
Merge with the one in White River.
I don't know. No, I think it was to merge with,
Keene.
yeah. Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, Keene.
Keene,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is Keene a VA system?
It's a
There's
CBOP.
VA clinic.
Oh, there is a VA clinic, but not a hospital.
Correct. And the next closest hospital is Manchester.
Or White River, actually.
Well,
But I
not-
mean, after White River.
From Keene, it would be Manchester.
Well, that's not a hospital. Manchester Keene is a clinic.
Right.
Yeah, Keene is a
Between
clinic.
White River and Manchester, there's no.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a,
Sorry, ladies' office isn't waiting.
oh, yes, I'm sorry, Catherine, did you want to weigh in here? I am sorry. We just kind of started-
Sure. I wasn't sure if General Knight was, going to finish up his testimony and where you wanted me to fit in, but I did prepare some remarks and happy to also address some of the questions that are coming up now as well.
No, that's fine. We've kind of been doing this pretty informally and just chatting, so please go ahead.
So jump in. You've just muted yourself again.
I'm sorry, I'm on double monitors, having just recently, we're all returning to the office and it's not quite working as well as my little laptop at home. So thank you for making the time. If you don't mind, I'd like to just run through a couple of my remarks because I did take the time to look at your last session and I thought there might be a few things to that might be helpful. And then there are a couple of questions that I think have come up around VA eligibility and whatnot that I'm happy to address as well. But I'm Catherine Long. I'm Senator Leahy's Veterans and Military Caseworker. And again, I'm sorry we weren't able to attend last time, but this is the great thing about the YouTube era is I got to hear the testimony and the questions that came up last time. So I wanted to just start by echoing what Congressman Welch and Catherine Van Hayes said on behalf of Senator Sanders. Senator Leahy has been saying for 20 years that we never should have gone to war on a credit card. We need to be prepared to pay the cost when we engage in sending folks overseas. For over 50 years, Senator Leahy's been advocating on behalf of veterans, victims of landmines, fighting to address the legacy of Agent Orange in Vietnam. And, as we all know, those are long fights. I talk with Vietnam veterans every day who are struggling to get compensation and health care. And I want to just really distinguish that there is a difference between eligibility for compensation and health care. And they're related, but they're not the same. Some of the hardest conversations that I have are when a widow calls wondering how they're going to pay their mortgage because their husband was exposed to Agent Orange. They maybe didn't work while they were caring for them. They the illness the husband died from wasn't on the presumptive list, or he wasn't in the location that the VA has said is presumptive, or their claim is languishing. Sometimes as a caseworker, we work with those folks, and eventually, especially working closely with Bob Burke's staff, they get a favorable decision, but it's not a quick process. We should have learned from Vietnam and Agent Orange, and maybe we've learned a little bit. I want to acknowledge June here. I think that it was 2016, maybe, I sat down with Mike at Sweet Simone's when he was starting to be sick. He had lost a lot of weight. And he told me his doctor was wondering if it was burn pits. And, I said, hey, have you been to the VA? And if I can, just throw out, without being too personal, that he wasn't using the VA at that time. So I think that it's really, really important to think in terms of what we all can do to educate the private sector. The VA is a really important component to this, but the private sector is where a lot of our guardsmen get their health care. So, with the work that Mike, June, Wesley Black, Mike Cram, and so many, they've been showing us that we don't have the kind of time that we've spent, working through the Agent Orange issues. I'm really grateful, and I know Senator Leahy is, for the work that you all are doing, because, every time you have one of those hearings, if it winds up in the press, it helps more people think, oh, this is an issue. So I know there's been a bit of talk about the registry. The registry has some limitations. We've talked about them. Some are technological. Some of them are just what's a registry for in the first place. It's not necessarily what we think, which is I have, headaches, and somehow the registry is going to tell me that I need to go ask my doctor if I have glioblastoma. That's probably not what the registry is going to do, but hearing about someone with that condition and their story, that may prompt somebody to ask their doctor, hey, could this be related to when I was deployed? So I think that that's a, sort of also really important part of what you all are doing, and especially the aspect where you're doing some education with healthcare providers and the medical society. I think registries can be an important entree to the conversation for folks. If you all do an outreach event and you have your, General Knight's outreach team out there talking to people, what are your symptoms? Maybe you'd want to do the registry. Maybe you'd actually want to go to the doctor. When you go to the doctor, maybe you'd want to ask your doctor if he can arrange for a consult at the War-Related Injuries and Illnesses Center. How can we start to sort of layer on the support and the awareness for this? Because I think that the most important thing is that a veteran who's deployed to Southwest Asia, who has those symptoms, who starts to lose weight, who has difficulty breathing, thinks, maybe that has to do with the fact that I was exposed to burn pits. Their doctor thinks maybe that's because I was exposed to burn pits. Can you screen me from those? And I think that when you get to the bottom of it, the most important question that we should all be asking, and I know this is something the state's talked about for a long time in your programs, is, are you a veteran? Have you served? How can we be asking that question every time? So that's why, one of the reasons that, in addition to the registry, Senator Leahy has been focusing a lot on research and education of our healthcare providers, both inside and outside the VA. Between FY18 and 22, he shepherded over $30 million of additional appropriations to the work of the Airborne Hazards and Burn Pits Center of Excellence, that Senator Calamar was wondering about. And Center of Excellence is just a term of art that the VA uses when they have sort of a medical consortium. Centers of Excellence, actually, in that case, there's the one that deals with burn pits is in New Jersey, but there's others in other places around the country. And they're all part of the War-Related Illnesses and Injuries Study Center. That's the lead VA agency for understanding and responding to the health needs of veterans who are exposed to burn pits. I want to just make sure that you all were aware that that center does consultation for individual veterans, for healthcare providers, and it offers a number of training modules. So it might be a good additional place to direct folks, maybe from the health department website that was set up in addition to the registry. I don't know if you had any questions about that, but I was going to just run through a little bit of the Senate side legislation that was touched on last time.
Sure.
Okay. So Congressman Welch talked about the PACT Act, and I know June's very supportive of that, and for very good reasons. We know that it also would have a long road ahead of it. And I believe that Katie touched on some of the reasons and perhaps some ways in which you could be working with your colleagues in other states to try to influence some of the other members. I think the Vermont delegation is not the hurdle here. On the Senate side, last year, Senate Veterans Affairs Committee unanimously passed a piece of legislation called the Cost of War Act. That was championed by Chairman Tester. It has many of the provisions of the PACT Act, and I'm sure June has a side-by-side of that. I think, there's some things that probably aren't quite as good, but it's definitely a fairly comprehensive piece of legislation. Unfortunately, it may not in that form go anywhere. So Senator Tester and Senator Jerry Moran have been working on more of a new strategy that starts with a piece of legislation called Healthcare for Burn Pits, Veterans Act S 3541. And that passed the Senate on a voice vote February 16th. And that, in addition to that legislation, I'll run through some of the provisions of that. The strategy that they're trying to work out will also create what they're calling a transparent process through which the VA will determine future presumptive conditions. I think right now that process isn't very transparent. Sometimes it's been delegated to the national academies and other research entities to kind of vet those recommendations, but it's never been very clear who and how those decisions are made. And then, ultimately that would then pave the way for benefits to be delivered. So among the things that piece of legislation will do is it expands the period of healthcare automatic eligibility from the 5 years that Bob mentioned to 10 years. It also provides a 1-year open enrollment period for a post 9/11 combat veteran who's beyond 10 years from separation, because we're sort of in this period now. We've been at this for 20 years. People had a 5-year window where they could enroll. The idea behind that really was you enroll for 5 years, get your health care at the VA, and during that time, if something is identified as an issue that could be service related, you could file a claim, have that service connected, and then continue to be eligible for care for that issue. So, in theory, getting people back into the VA either through that expanded window or the 1 year would be helpful. And then it's supposed to establish an outreach plan to contact veterans who do not enroll during that initial period of enhanced eligibility, incorporates clinical screening, and mandates toxic exposure related training for healthcare and benefits personnel at the VA, and then strengthens federal research on toxic exposures. What I can say is that June was very kind to spend a Friday, I believe it was a Friday afternoon recently with us, going through that legislation point by point. Sherman Patrick on our DC staff said, he never meets with advocates who've gone through legislation point by point and prepared notes. So we really appreciated that. And she has concerns. We absolutely hear those concerns, but also want to have something passed. It shouldn't require the advocacy of folks like June. That burden shouldn't be falling on you, but we appreciate all you do. I, like others, considered Mike a friend. My own son's name Ronan. I feel all the feelings that all of us feel about what happened. And, we want to do the right thing and we need to do the right thing. But I think what you're doing here really helps raise the awareness, which is just so important. So thank you.
Thank you. it is the numbers that we were given last time. It's just incredible to me that people could be arguing about with a $750 billion defense budget, and they're fighting about, well, what is a lot of money, but compared to that, it's small amounts. Okay, so that's, I'm going to say that the Department of Health isn't here today, but the Department of Health has a website that is, you can go, did you send that? It's, if you go to the Department of Health Vermont.gov, there's a website on there, and it's pretty nice. It's got the links to the,
Oh, good.
yeah. Yeah, it's pretty nice, and
I shared that with the committee,
Oh,
but I
good.
didn't post it.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty good website, and we did talk about doing some kind of a survey to see if doctors are actually doing that. And I think the feeling from the Vermont Medical Society was that that would take a lot of effort, and effort better spent just keeping on getting the word out.
Right, and just keep on asking them to ask,
Right.
are you a veteran, have you
Right.
served?
Yeah,
And if you have, were you exposed?
yeah.
Those are the key questions.
The question of cost came up during an interview about a month ago on this topic. And the reporter asked, or said that there were some members of Congress that said, well, this is expensive, how are we gonna pay for it? And my response was, as you know, as Catherine noted, why don't you ask the families about their cost before you start putting a price tag on something like this?
Yeah, and I think that we've heard it from both Sanders and Welch and Leahy, all of them that say the cost of war needs to include the cost of the warrior, the taking care of the warrior.
Yeah. The war is just the beginning.
And the cost of defense needs to of the defender, protect the defender. So it is stunning to me that we're fighting about.
These centers of excellence, they are active. So we have a soldier that's been struggling with, they can't figure it out. It's been 15 months. And he's run through every possible test you could imagine. And he recently was enrolled in the Center of Excellence in New Jersey.
Oh.
So he's made one trip down there already. And he will continue to be participating in that program.
From burn exposure?
Well, he's enrolled in that Center of Excellence.
Yeah. And
Trying to
so
go down that path.
They put their heads together and try and figure out what it is, and
Yeah.
and maybe more places, more diseases than will become on the presumptive list.
Well, we have
And
to.
Madam Chair, can I just jump in because I
Sure.
think it's important to message this in a way that doesn't discourage people. Presumption is sort of it's the express lane to a decision. If you have presumption, all you have to show is that you were somewhere. But that's not the only way that you can service connect a medical issue. If you have medical evidence and your doctor can point to the medical research that shows that there's a connection between pancreatic cancer and environmental exposure, you submit that and you may get a favorable decision. And I think that's really important that people hear that. We don't need to wait for a presumption for people to file claims. We should be going ahead and filing claims, because the other thing that does is it sets in writing an effective date. And should the law go back and be changed in the future, they'll go back and make the benefit retroactive to that date. That's what happened with a lot of the Agent Orange presumptions. They go back, it's called a Niemer process based on a court case. They go back, people come in with $100,000 retro payments after something like that. So it's really important that if people think they have a service-connected condition, they go ahead and file. And Bob
Yeah,
may
this
not
is-
like to hear that. It makes more work.
I
but-
know, I think he does. I think he likes it. Isn't it kind of a circle? I mean, if people don't register and the diseases don't get registered, then they aren't going to become presumptive. But if they're not presumptive, you don't register because it's like
It's a catch-22.
yeah. So
So just to go to the presumptive diseases in June, and Greg has just mentioned all the cancers people die of. At what point are we actually going to get to the serious and expensive presumptive diseases that people are clearly dying from, not just suffering from?
well, we
I
need
mean,
to keep
asthma
people
is not
registered.
something people die from. I mean, it's rare.
Part of the legislation that F-3541 has to do with setting up these, epidemiology studies. And so, but again, like Agent Orange, this could take a very long time. So I think I appreciate Catherine's testimony. I think she's right, like trying to get something rather than nothing. And I think having our veterans given 10 years to enroll in the VA is a plus. I think, though, that the idea that the registry really is, from my perspective, is only a tool for awareness, because the data in the registry is not good data. Because when you enroll, Mike enrolled in the registry as soon as it, and I think I said this before, as soon as it came out, but he was diagnosed 3 years after, and there's no way to update that registry to say he had, a service-connected disability. He was able to show medical evidence and he was denied the DOD disability, but he got the VA disability. Those are two very different disabilities. VA is sort of a minimal benefit. The DOD benefit is really based on your service, length of service, your rank. And so that's not the case with the VA. And so it does make a difference. So hopefully we'll get there on the presumptive, but it is going to cost a lot of money. And right now I work with TAPS, which is the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, and they're predicting we are going to lose more military and veterans to illness than we are currently losing to suicide. And if it hasn't already surpassed. But these cancers take, 10, 15 years to manifest. So 5 or 10 years might not be enough. Without the presumption, a lot of people are going to fall through the cracks.
Yeah. So that's one thing we could figure out, or somebody could figure out, how to amend one's burn pit registration. That seems to me kind of a low-hanging fruit.
Or that the VA, they could figure out.
Yes,
how
that the VA could figure out how to amend as people progress through life. You register at one point and then maybe in 5 years something manifests itself. It doesn't strike me as a difficult thing to amend that registration.
I think General Knight can answer this question better than I can, but the EILER system that's being developed will have the veteran and the military member will have access to it, and that is an updatable database, and I can't remember what it stands for.
I don't remember, Jim, but I think it makes, I'll have to check with, I'll probably check with Dr. Rush and his team. But it makes sense to me. I agree with Senator Clarkson. If this is the system that does it, so you've enrolled once, that's great. But there's no so what. There's no updating.
Yeah.
Yes, you were here on these multiple deployments on multiple dates, these locations. 5 to 10 years later, you develop some aberrant form of cancer. You're not telling the system that.
Right.
Is that?
But this new system won't allow that,
I believe that is true.
but it will allow.
I believe that is true. But I
It
also,
will not allow you to update it.
It will not.
It will not.
I think we're talking about, June mentioned the EILER system, which I think is a DOD VA system, different from the registry. I appreciate that there's been talk of making changes to the registry, but I agree with June and in talking with the folks at the war-related illnesses, that's the registry is important for awareness building. It's not an epidemiological research tool, and whereas this longitudinal system will be. But you can sort of do two things at once, and since the registry is something that we can promote, and it can then be a tool for the VA to reach back out to disseminate information, I think it's not a worthless thing at all. It's useful.
It's not worthless, but it is low-hanging fruit to be able to update it. That is just like not difficult. That should not be that difficult.
It was difficult for people to even register before,
Yes.
so at least they've figured that part out, but I don't know that I would say it's low.
Well, but it
Because-
should be. It's a technological. It's a technological fix. It shouldn't be that difficult. I mean, heavens, we have people rocketing in space every other day. We should be able to figure out how to simply update an IT system.
We should.
So for Catherine or June, it's been a very long time since I enrolled in the registry. I don't recall there being a box saying, would you like follow-up? And I think that is the case now. Do you want follow-up from the VA? You guys check the box in the registry, and a VA local clinic will reach out to the veteran. Is that true?
I believe that when you register now, I can't speak to what happened before, but I do believe that when you register now, you can indicate that you want to have an exam. I forget what it's called. It's an environmental exposure exam. They used to call them Agent Orange exams. So, with their environmental health folks, it's nice because that gets a veteran into the VA. Anytime you get a veteran into the VA, if they have a good experience, that gives them the opportunity to consider getting healthcare there.
And I believe that's been the case for at least 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so I registered in 2019 and requested and received an exam. I think one of the distinctions, though, about the registry, they're not collecting any medical data, right? It's a series of questions to determine potential exposure. But it's not, even if you're starting to be seen at the VA for a medical condition possibly related, that doesn't feed back into the registry.
That and the updating is something that it should be able to be, handled. But, okay, well, I am, last time you guys weren't here, and my awareness of this issue around, not the whole VA issue, but around the burn pits, came directly, and I'm going to give credit to Keith Clark, because he's the one that brought it up to me. He said, my friend just died, that was Mike, and I was in the same position, and so he's afraid for his own life. And he said, you got to do something about it. And Tim Ash was the one that got us here. I'm really giving credit to those two people because I had no idea what to do when Keith said that to me. And Tim said, here's what we'll do.
So we need await an update on what might be possible this summer.
June has a.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to go back to the fact that although the data in the registry is not great data, it is the tool that we need in order to raise awareness. If we can encourage people to get on the registry, our veterans encourage family members to encourage their family members to get on the registry, that's going to make a lot of difference in the awareness of what could happen. Mike was on the registry, but there was no visibility on people getting sick from the burn pits. Now there's a lot more visibility, so I think people will pay attention, and that's why this PSA will be important, because the call to action is to get on the registry. And I did speak with WCAX. Jay Barton has written a script. I know that Senator Collmore reached out to Wendy Mays. She called me, and I have since reached out to Dan Dubonnet. What we're going to need is, we have a nonprofit now. The Hunter 7 Foundation has agreed to be the nonprofit, which you need for a PSA, to be highlighted. They're a national nonprofit who is working on getting the evidence, the science behind the connection between exposure and illness. And what we need is to get this information out nationally.
Yeah.
Hey, June, anything you need from me, I'm happy to help. If you need another voice, another opportunity for interviews, just let me know. And obviously I have an amazing face for radio, so I'm happy to help out.
Okay, I'll let you know. And I can send the script, that's the draft script, which there's still going to be updating, but I could send that to Gail so you can all see what's happened so far.
Oh, that would be great.
And I think Senator Colmer had a really good idea when we were talking about this, is that there are many different types of radio stations, FM and AM. And so you do one PSA that you put on the radio, on the station that the kids listen to. Tell your grandpa, tell your uncle, tell your dad.
Or your mother.
Or your mother to go out and do this, but that you keep your audience in mind.
Target your audience.
Yeah, target your audience. And I think that was such a great idea, because the kids that are listening to bebop and rap aren't probably going to respond to the same one that we old fogies are.
Very true.
Well, June, if you're available at some point this week, I'll send you a note. Maybe I'll have an opportunity if you're around. I'll stop by in the evening and we'll catch up.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And because Bob Tinsel said that he was going to talk to the people at BPR and the television station, so as he was going to use me as the point person just to get information out, but I'm not the person that would be doing it. So he talked about doing something on Vermont Edition, I think it's called, and a couple different programs on both the television and the radio. So
We need to follow.
he's gonna get back to me. So we will figure this out, get some more word out. And then would love if you are willing to put up the travel around Vermont.
Yeah,
I will.
That would,
We'll re-engage our executive
yeah.
assistant.
And I know that people would love to sponsor you and get the word out in the community, in our communities.
Well, and it's campaign season coming up, sadly, very shortly. So
Oh, well,
people
That
know.
should be an integral part of it.
Exactly. People will love coming out.
Who better to talk than veterans? They vote.
Well, we hope everybody.
Sometimes they run for office.
Sometimes.
And sometimes even if you're not running for an office, you might want to get out there and promote it.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you so much
Thank you,
for
ma'am.
spending your afternoon with us. Thank you
Catherine,
again.
June, Bob, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, Catherine.
Thank you.
Bob.
Thank you very much, Senators.
See you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks.